Welcome to the Explainer. Imagine building a tool so astonishingly capable, so profoundly powerful, that as its creator, you actually become too afraid to release it to the public. Seriously, think about that for a second. Well, that is exactly what happened with Anthropic's highly anticipated Claude model earlier this year. Today, we're unraveling the absolutely fascinating story of a model that broke the boundaries of what we thought was possible, the unprecedented steps taken to hold it back, and the compromised, yet wildly powerful version that has finally arrived on our screens.
So let's go back to April 2026. The whole tech world was basically holding its breath for the release of Claude Mythos. But launch day came and went with this shocking announcement. Anthropic had delayed the release by 2 full months. Now you might be wondering, why on earth would they do that? Well, during testing, they discovered the model's cybersecurity offensive capabilities were simply too potent. It was literally deemed a security risk to hand that level of power over to the general public. They had to figure out how to put the genie back in the bottle, or at least how to put a heavy safety lock on it.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for today. We're going to cover the split-release solution, the astonishing power of Fable 5, the cost of that power, the specific capability filters they built in, and finally, some crucial data policy changes you definitely need to know about.
All right, starting with number 1, the split-release solution, and how they actually managed to release Mythos to the world.
To solve this massive safety crisis, Anthropic did something really clever. They split the release into 2 totally distinct models. On the one hand, you've got Mythos 5. This is the original, unfiltered powerhouse. But here's the thing. You can't just log in and use it. It's heavily restricted and available only to very specific specialists, like high-level cybersecurity professionals. On the other hand, we have Fable 5. This is the version with the built-in capability filters, and it's the one that's been made generally available to the public. So, for the rest of this explainer, we are focusing entirely on Fable 5 because that's the model that you and I actually have access to right now.
Moving on to Section 2, Astonishing Fable 5 Power, where we'll look at how it's just crushing benchmarks and coding speeds.
Let's validate the hype for a second here, because Fable 5 isn't just some compromised leftover model. It is consistently beating rivals like ChatGPT and Gemini in benchmark tests. And we're not talking by a little bit either. It's crushing them by really noticeable margins. To truly grasp this level of power, just look at this number, 50 million. That is the massive number of lines of Ruby source code that the tech giant Stripe needed to migrate. Anyone in tech knows that migrating a codebase of that sheer size is a monumental, totally headache-inducing task for any human engineering team.
And this brilliantly illustrates the jaw-dropping efficiency we are now dealing with. A human development team, that would take over 2 months to complete a massive 50 million line migration. Fable 5 did the whole thing in just 1 day, literally 24 hours. And the crazy part is, it doesn't stop at corporate coding. Anthropic showed Fable 5 playing complex factory automation games like Factorio. It was generating browser-based 3D CAD models and even coding fluid simulators synced to EDM beats. The sheer capability ceiling has just been blown wide open.
But of course, that brings us to Section 3, the cost of power, and how to start budgeting for the Fable 5 era. With this overwhelming level of capability, the very first question your finance department is going to ask is, okay, what is this actually going to cost us? Well, Fable 5 costs $10 per 1 million input tokens and $50 per 1 million output tokens. Now, to put that into perspective, that's roughly double the price of previous generation models. So yeah, finance teams are definitely going to be sweating over their token budgets this year. However, believe it or not, this is actually a massive relief. Earlier preview rumors for the full Mythos model showed terrifying prices. We're talking $25 for input and $125 for output. So, while it's twice as expensive as what you might be used to, it's just a fraction of what the industry actually feared it would be.
All right, let's look at Section 4, the capability filters. It's time to talk about the deliberate weaknesses of Fable 5.
So we know Fable 5 is incredibly smart and incredibly fast, but let's introduce the catch to our overpowered hero. Exactly how did Anthropic nerf this model to make it safe for the public? Well, here are the specific areas where Fable 5 has been intentionally restricted. Cybersecurity offense, as we already discussed, is heavily filtered. But look at biology and chemistry. The AI is actively restricted from helping to design synthetic DNA or RNA or creating dangerous chemical compounds. This actually aligns perfectly with a recent open letter signed by the CEOs of OpenAI, Google, and Anthropic, demanding stricter regulations on AI's role in synthetic biology risks. And finally, there's a filter on AI development and distillation. Let's see how this builds into a fascinating new tech battleground.
To really understand that last filter,
we first need to define AI distillation. Basically, this is a super common industry practice where rival developers efficiently train their own competing AI models by feeding them the high-quality input and output data generated by a much more powerful AI, like Fable 5. It's essentially using your competitor's absolute genius to train your own software. And obviously, Anthropic wants to protect their intellectual property from this kind of scraping.
Now, what's really interesting about this defense is how Fable 5 actually fights back. It features what they call a silent weakening defense. If the AI detects that its prompts and outputs are being systematically used for AI distillation by a rival company, it doesn't just throw up a warning or an error code. Instead, it will quietly, completely invisibly degrade the quality of its own outputs. It is such a sneaky, brilliant defense mechanism, and it really signals a totally new, slightly ruthless phase in corporate AI warfare.
Which brings us to our final section, number 5, crucial data policy changes and a massive warning for information systems.
This is absolutely critical. If your company is planning to adopt Fable 5, it is going to fundamentally change your data privacy compliance. 30. That is the number of days Fable 5 introduces for a brand new mandatory data retention policy. Whenever you use Fable 5, your data is retained on Anthropic servers for 30 days. Now, they state this is strictly for safety monitoring purposes, just to ensure the model isn't being used maliciously, and not for training future models. But for corporate IT, this is a massive shift.
And that urgency is captured perfectly right here. Information systems departments must rethink their zero-retention enterprise assumptions before adopting Fable 5. Previously, a lot of enterprise AI plans guaranteed absolute zero server retention. Your data went in, the answer came out, and nothing was ever saved. Fable 5 totally changes the rules of the game. If you are handling highly sensitive internal corporate data, your IT team needs to be fully aware of this 30-day safety hold before anyone just starts copy-pasting proprietary code into the prompt box.
Finally, let's take a quick look at the incredibly narrow adoption window we are currently sitting in. So Mythos was delayed in April, Fable 5 just dropped on June 10th and is currently included under existing high-tier subscription plans. But mark your calendars for June 23rd, 2026, because that is when the expensive pay-as-you-go billing begins. The strategy here is crystal clear. If you have a massive ultra-code project, like say translating millions of lines of Ruby, you need to be testing it heavily right now. Find all the bugs, test the capabilities, and get it done before that expensive meter starts running on the 23rd.
So, what does this all mean for us? It leaves us with this final, really important question. Are your budgets and data security policies actually ready for the Fable 5 era? We're looking at a tool that can do 2 months of complex human labor in a single day. But it demands double the budget, it introduces invisible corporate defense mechanisms, and it forces a complete rewrite of enterprise data retention rules. The power is phenomenal, no doubt about it, but it requires serious strategic planning to harness it responsibly. So start testing, start budgeting, and definitely go talk to your IT departments today. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.